Okay, so today we're going to go through and we're going to show you how to tighten up the emergency brake. All right, so on this Jeep, it's a manual, right? So obviously I can't just put it in park. So when it's in neutral and you set the emergency brake, you can see here real quick that if I let off the brake, we start moving, and we're not on that big of an incline right now. So I'm going to walk you through adjusting the emergency brake shoes. And this is a 2018, it's a JL. They had a 2018 JL and a 2018 JK. So if you have a 2018 JL, you've not had to work on it yet, you're better off telling them it's a 19. Otherwise, you'll get JK parts. So with that, let's dig in. Okay, so spared you taking tires off, getting it jacked up. Just make sure that your front wheels are blocked. Even if you're on level ground, block them forward or backwards. We're at a little bit of a incline towards the end of the street here, so I've got it shifted down into 4 low, just to help a little bit. Right. So your emergency brakes on a Jeep, they're not tied into your main calipers at all. They're actually tied into, there's a drum right here, right? So we have to take off the brake caliper, the mount. You have to remove this Torx bolt to pull this rotor off of there. Rotor, drum, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure there's a technical name for it. So let's see, I'm guessing it's probably around a T30. Now I know some people leave these out. I'm not one of those people. So keep all your parts. You can see if I had this apart before. It a 13 millimeter and a 15 millimeter wrench. Okay, so you have to take a caliper off, so you got your 2 slide bolts, right? You're not gonna have to take the main banjo loose. So I've got the caliper up here, it's zip tied to the sway bar, that way I don't have to worry about it falling. Right, so now I'm gonna pop the shoes off. I gotta pop off the bracket and then take the rotor off. So something I like to do is, I don't like having all these loose bolts everywhere. Get this bolt free. So you can see it just fits. So I'm only going to be able to break this free, and I might have to either use my fingers or a wrench, right? So 18 millimeter. So get it freed so I can break it and then go in with a wrench. Now this would be the case if you have some ratcheting wrenches. It'd be nice. But I love this swivel head ratchet. It sneaks into about everywhere. So one thing you really want to be careful of, this line right here, that's your speed sensor. Do not damage that. Okay, so taking off the bracket, shoes come off with it. Set that aside. Okay, so the big thing, my hands are dirty. I'm not going to touch the actual rotor section itself, but we'll still clean it otherwise. And we'll just wiggle this off. And that gets us to the shoes. I'm going to go wash my greasy hands before I start touching all this, otherwise we'll throw these away. Okay, I'm going to blow these out, just get all the dust out. Okay, so a little breakdown of how these work. So how these work is when you pull the cable, these little cams right here open up these shoes. Right? Those open up the shoes and it squeezes against the inside of the brake drum. So on the inside of your drum is where your brakes bear up against. And you want to check this to make sure that there's no big gouges in here. You know, there's normal wear, there's not a huge lip in there. And we'll wipe that out before we're done. This right here is your adjuster. So you turn this and it'll spread these shoes outward. And how you have to do that is there is a little rubber boot on the back of this that you can pull out, and you can reach through there. Okay, so there's this rubber boot, right? You can reach through the back of this with a screwdriver or a brake tool, turn this adjuster, and that'll spread these open, right? But I always adjust them first by feel, then I make minor adjustments with it on there. Alright, so let's adjust it. Your wheel speed sensor's down in here. There's the pickup. You ever have an issue? That right there is the pickup, right next to it. I'll put an arrow in the video. But you know, just give it a good once over. Now if you just put these on and you gotta adjust, come in that little hole in the back and you'll be fine. But I want to inspect these as well. Okay, so we're just going to adjust this a little bit. So the big thing is make sure you go in the right direction when you're adjusting it. Okay, we'll adjust it out a little bit. Okay, so I feel they're a little tight, so that means I'm close. We'll back them off just a little bit. Because I don't want them so tight that they wear into the rotor. So they on and off good, they drag a little bit, they're going to wear some more. So I'm going to clean this one up and that's it. Now if I wanted to make them tighter, you can use that adjuster on the back. But where I usually use that is if these start wearing and it wore into the rotor, into the drum, you can back it off back there to collapse those shoes so you can get this up over that lip. Okay, now this is something you're going to have to do at very, very leisure. So I'm just going to, where these shoes go in, I'm just brushing a little bit of anti-seize on them because they lock up on you real quick. What happens if they're not allowed to float, they will bind up on you. Okay. Now if you get anti-seize on the main pads, you kiss those brakes goodbye. They will no longer work for you. So this is a very, very thin coat. Okay. I'll put just a little bit on these cams so that they work. Once again, you go crazy with this and you throw those away. And lastly, something I always do, I always put just a little bit of anti-seize on the face and around where the axle goes on, so that you're not sitting out there on the road or the trail trying to beat that rusted rotor off your axle with they seized up together. You don't got to paint it on there, just give it a nice little coating. Little acid brushes work good for that. And I always use this, and I'll put this in the descriptions. Now, you can adjust just the emergency brake through that little slot in the back. Reach through there with a screwdriver, and you can adjust it with no problems. But if you want to do any kind of inspections, you have to pull it off. That's what we're doing. We've got 60,000 miles on this Jeep now, so a little inspection's a good thing. Okay, so just a little bit of brake cleaner. I'm gonna wipe off the rotor. That way if you touched it or anything, it gets all the old greasy fingerprints off. Now this isn't being sponsored by O'Reilly's Auto Parts, but wouldn't mind if it was. But that's where I usually get my parts at. Now I know on this 18, I've had some trouble getting parts I've had to go to the dealer for. You may or may not. There's not a lot of parts out there. Once again, if you have an 18 JL, tell them it's a 19. Otherwise, you're going to get sent home with JK parts, not JL parts. That's happened to me enough times to know not to do that no more. Okay, so if you took out this plug hole here, make sure you put the plug back in. And once again, if you know your brakes are good, pull this plug out, reach in with the screwdriver, just turn it. You'll feel it real quick if you're going the right way. Reach in there, turn it, and if you know everything's good. But if you actually wheel your rig, pull it apart and look at it. Take a look and make sure. It's a good time just to go through everything. We never give these things enough maintenance. Okay, so I'm taking these pads out of here. The slides are all full of mud and everything. I'm going to blow all that out. The pads look really good. These are the original pads on it. Plenty of life. I'm just going to get all this mud and everything off of these, blow it off, and then you'll see this go back together. Okay, so something to look at on this housing for your brake shoes. You got these two bolts that your caliper mounts to, right? So they go back and forth. They got to be free. This rubber boot that's on them, that rubber boot's ripped or torn, replace it. Now this one still has a lot of goop still in it from factory. If this doesn't feel nice and loose, like there's plenty of goop still on it, pop the boot, pull the pin out, put anti-seize on it, make sure the boot goes on, make sure that the boot isn't ripped, because it's that sliding is what makes your brakes actually work. And if you've been working and you get any grease on your pads, just replace them. You'll never get it off there. So this is kind of the heart and soul of your shoes. So if you got to replace your shoes, and so the tabs, they go right inside these little grooves. You just pop these into those grooves. So when you pop this in, you're gonna have to pull this little piece of sheet metal down, and they go from the inside out, not outside in. Now if you pry all this down, you can, but it's just as easy to take it off, and that way you can inspect everything. Right, so give yourself plenty of opening. Let's put them on. Okay, I'm gonna get these two bolts ready. Put a little anti-seize on them. Remember, don't touch your actual brakes. So I'm going to slide this in, get it in place, you get a bolt in there. And since you've had this apart, you have to get the pads recentered. So get the first bolt started. And get the second one in. Now, I know air tools are nice, but I like to be able to feel what's going on here. So I rarely use air tools and stuff like this. I might use it periodically for disassembly, but never re. Okay, so I'm going to snug these bolts up. Be very careful of that speed sensor wire, they're sensitive. Okay, so now we can cut our caliper free. And there's always a chance you have to push this piston back. So if you do, I would just take a C-clamp and I just clamp it over. Should go right back on since we didn't change the pads. Alright, then lastly, the 2 bolts that hold that on. We're going to anti-seize those. Get them started. Get a 13mm and a 15mm wrench. So people make fun of me using anti-seize all the time, but they don't mind it when they follow the work I've done, so they can take it apart. And when you're out on the trail or the road, it's not the time you want to have to figure out how to beat something apart. And lastly, we got to put this little bolt back in that holds the rotor back on. They don't get too aggressive with this because it's not a whole lot of threads on this thing. Just kind of wiggle it a little bit to get remember where it's at. There's plenty of opportunities in the face of this to get this lined up. Just wiggle it a little bit, get it lined up. Don't force it, you'll strip it. And this just snugs, because even if it comes loose, your rim is sitting right here. So it doesn't have to be stupid tight. Your rim will keep it sandwiched even if it comes loose. Alright, so now all you do is we gotta do the other side and put the tire back on, give it a try. So that's how you adjust your emergency brake. It's not as bad as if you're driving an automatic. You can just put it in park, no big deal. But if you're driving a manual, you can put it in gear, but if it's steep enough hill and it overrides the compression in your gearing and everything, it'll take off on you. So don't think as you put it in gear that that's it. If it starts moving, your engine will turn over, your gearing will engage, and it can still go. So fix your emergency brake, put it in gear, put it in reverse, that's your lowest gear, and you'll be okay. So until next time, this is Jeepingmo. We'll see you on the next adventure.